My name is Anna, and my life was a carefully curated collection of quiet moments. I was a librarian, a profession that suited my love for order and predictable narratives. My days were measured by the gentle rustle of turning pages and the hushed whispers of patrons. I was an only child. My parents had passed away a few years prior, and my small, neat apartment was my sanctuary. My story, I believed, was simple and fully written. That belief was shattered on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was at the main circulation desk when she walked in. For a moment, my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. It was like looking into a mirror, but the mirror was walking, breathing, and shaking rain from its coat. The woman was me, not just similar, identical. She had my mousy brown hair, my slightly crooked nose, the same green eyes I saw every morning. Even the way she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear was an exact echo of a habit I thought was uniquely mine. The library, usually a sea of silence, was suddenly filled with a ripple of hushed gasps. My colleague, David, stared at her, then back at me, his mouth hanging open. The woman's eyes found mine across the room, and her face went pale with the same shock I felt. She walked towards my desk, her movements hesitant, as if she were approaching a ghost. "This is going to sound crazy," she said, her voice a fraction deeper than mine, but shaking. "But who are you?" "I was about to ask you the same thing," I managed to whisper. We stood there, two impossible reflections, and shakily pulled out our driver's licenses. Her name was Catherine, but she went by Kate. We were both 28 years old. We were born on the same day, in the same city, but at two different hospitals, to two different sets of parents. The information did nothing to solve the mystery. It only deepened it. "I'm an only child," I said, my voice trembling. "Me too," she replied, her eyes wide with disbelief. On a whim, I asked her another question. "This is random, but do you have any allergies?" "Just one," she said. "A really weird one. Pineapple." I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. I had the same rare allergy. Before I could stop myself, I reached out and gently brushed the hair back from behind her left ear, and there it was. A small, crescent-shaped birthmark, identical to the one I had traced with my own fingers 1,000 times. This was no longer a coincidence. This was a violation of the laws of nature. We were two different people, yet we shared a face, a birthday, a rare allergy, and a birthmark. "We need to talk," Kate said, her voice barely audible. "Not here!" We agreed to meet for coffee the next morning. That night, for the first time in my life, I took out my own birth certificate, the official document that proved my existence, and stared at it. The neat, typed letters that spelled out my name, my parents' names, suddenly felt like a fragile piece of fiction. My entire life, my simple, predictable story, had just been torn wide open, and I had a terrifying feeling that the truth of who I really was about to be revealed. The coffee shop was buzzing with morning chatter, but between Kate and me, there was a bubble of tense silence. We sat across from each other, a surreal mirror image, trying to stitch together the torn pages of our lives. We compared everything: childhood memories, favorite foods, fears, and dreams. The similarities were uncanny. We both had a fear of deep water and a love for old black and white movies. The first real crack in the mystery appeared when we talked about our parents. My parents, both deceased, had been simple, loving people, a teacher and an accountant. Kate's parents were also loving, but her father, Dr. Alistair Finch, was a prominent physician. My blood ran cold when she mentioned the name of the hospital he had worked at for over 30 years. It was St. Jude's General, the same hospital where my birth certificate said I was born. The coincidence was too glaring to ignore. Our investigation started there. Getting access to two 8-year-old birth records was a bureaucratic nightmare. But Kate's connection to her father proved to be the key. She managed to get the name of a retired head nurse, a woman named Beverly, who had worked in the maternity ward for 40 years and had been a close colleague of her father. We met Beverly in a quiet park. She was an elderly woman with kind eyes that held a lifetime of secrets. When we told her our story, a look of profound recognition and sadness washed over her face. "I always wondered," she whispered. "I prayed I was wrong." She told us about Kate's father, Dr. Finch. He was a brilliant, respected doctor, but he had a secret. He and his wife were unable to have children. It was their one great sorrow. Beverly then told us about a chaotic night. The night we were born. A young, terrified single mother had been brought in premature labor. She had given birth to identical twin girls. "That young mother was your biological mother," Beverly said, her voice trembling. "She was alone, with no resources. She made a heartbreaking decision. She agreed to an illegal, off-the-books adoption. She gave one of you to a good, childless couple, the ones you know as your parents, Anna and Dr. Finch. In his desperation for a child, he falsified records, claiming the other twin, you, Kate, was his own biological daughter, born at a different hospital. The confession was staggering. We were twins, illegally separated at birth. One sold, the other stolen. But as we were processing this earth-shattering revelation, Beverly's expression grew darker. "But there's more," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "That's not the whole story. The young mother, she didn't have twins. She gave birth to identical triplets." Kate and I stared at her, speechless. "Triplets?" "The third baby," Beverly continued, her eyes filled with an old, deep-seated fear, "was born with a weak heart. Dr. Finch recorded her as stillborn. The young mother was told her third daughter had died. But I was there. I saw the baby. She was weak, yes, but she was alive. I don't know what happened to her after that night. Dr. Finch handled it all. He told everyone she had passed away. We had come here looking for an explanation and found an even darker mystery. We weren't just separated twins. We were 2/3 of a whole. And our third sister was either dead or she had been made to disappear. The revelation that we were 2 of 3 sisters, with the third one's fate a terrifying mystery, changed everything. Our personal quest for identity became a desperate search for our lost sibling. Our only lead was the man who had orchestrated the entire lie, Kate's father, Dr. Finch. Confronting the man she had loved and trusted her entire life was the hardest thing Kate had ever had to do. I waited in the car, a silent pillar of support, as she walked into her parents' stately home. An hour later, she emerged, her face pale but her eyes filled with a new, grim determination. He had confessed everything. Our third sister, whom he had named Lily on the falsified records, was indeed born alive but with a severe heart defect. Our biological mother, young and terrified, could not handle the prospect of a sick child. Dr. Finch, in a twisted act of what he called mercy and a desperate attempt to cover his tracks, had declared the baby stillborn. He then used his influence to have Lily quietly admitted to a long-term care facility, creating a trust fund to pay for her expenses anonymously. He had never seen her again and had no idea if she had even survived past childhood. Armed with a new name and the name of the facility, we drove there the next day. It was a quiet, sterile place. Our hearts pounded as a nurse led us down a long hallway to a small, sunlit room. And there, sitting in a wheelchair by the window, was a young woman. Her body was frail, and her movements were limited, but her face was ours. It was like looking at a fragile, ethereal version of ourselves. She had our eyes, our nose. Lily was non-verbal, her development stunted by the heart condition that had never been properly addressed in her early years. She turned her head as we entered, and her eyes, those familiar green eyes, widened with a look of pure, silent recognition. The reunion was not one of joyful laughter, but of quiet, profound tears. We didn't get to hug a sister who could tell us her life story. Instead, we sat on either side of her, holding her delicate hands, and for the first time, the 3 of us were together. We were a broken, scattered story, finally on the same page. The legal fallout for Dr. Finch was significant, but our focus was on Lily. We became her legal guardians, moving her to a state-of-the-art facility just minutes from my own home. We visit her every day. I read to her just like I do at the library, and Kate, the artist, brings paints and fills her room with color. She cannot speak, but when we are there, she smiles, a smile that is so achingly familiar, it takes my breath away. I came into this looking for a simple truth about myself. Instead, I found a sister I never knew I had, and another who had needed me her entire life. Our story wasn't the simple, happy narrative I once craved. It was a messy, heartbreaking, and beautiful epic, and for the first time, it felt complete.